Hey guys, so I have a book review today and I am so excited to talk about this book. I finished it last night and I finished it after reading over 200 pages in one day. I tore through this book. So if you haven't already seen the title and you don't know what I'm talking about, it's this book right here, Divergent by Veronica Roth. Yeah, I love this book a lot. It was published in 2011, and the sequel is actually coming out on May 1st, so I will definitely be snatching that one up. I have all these notes here that I'm trying to keep myself from going off on a tangent because I feel like that's going to happen in this review because I have a lot to say and a lot of different feelings all over the place. So, okay, short synopsis. I know many of you have read this, but there are some people who haven't, so I will do a brief explanation. So there's a main character, her name is Beatrice, but she picks up the nickname Triss, and she lives with her family in a faction. This is a dystopian book, and it takes place in dystopian Chicago. More on that later. And the dystopian Chicago is split up into 5 factions, and she lives in abnegation, which basically means selflessness. They're extremely giving, they never think about themselves, and she's raised this way. However, when you turn 16, you can take a test, and then you get to choose if you want to stay in your faction or go to a different one. Beatrice decides to change, and that's because she's divergent. When you take the test, you usually get a certain result, and that can give you an idea of where you should go. However, Beatrice got multiple results, so she really got to choose what she wanted. And she picked Dauntless, which are the brave. Her brother chooses Erudite, which is knowledge, intelligence. Both her brother and her leave her family behind and go to these different factions for initiation. And most of this book is leading up to that initiation point when they have to do like the final test to see if they become part of the faction. If they don't become part of the faction, they're factionless, and it's basically like being a homeless person. But while she's there in Dauntless, she makes new friends. She meets this guy named Four. He's pretty cool. And she has to battle some enemies. And when I say enemies, I mean not only people that she doesn't get along with in the faction during initiation, but also because she's divergent, it's apparently a bad thing. And we don't know why. Just like Triss, it follows her, so we have no idea why being divergent is bad. But there are people who want individuals who are divergent to be dead. So she has to not only fight her way through this initiation, battle some enemies that she meets in her faction, but she also has to battle enemies in the government in general. And she has to hide who she truly is because she is divergent. There's some stuff going on in the government, as there always is with dystopian books. There's a little bit of tension, little bit. There's a lot of tension between some of the factions and between mostly Erudite and Abnegation, which is Triss's home, so of course she's supposed to have allegiance to Dauntless because she chose them, but she still wants to stick up for her mother and her father, which are in abnegation. So the first half of this book, I was reading it, and I thought it was a strong book. It was good. There was nothing exceedingly awesome about it. I was like, okay, it's young adult, it's dystopia, that's awesome. She goes to the faction, has to meet new people, deal with these issues, and I'm like, okay, like, she could have ended this story at having Triss, like, get into Dauntless and just have it be a good story. But about 250 pages in, things started to get really great. And that's when I started to race through the pages. I read the 200 plus pages yesterday because I got sucked into it. The romance, I actually totally got behind the romance. I loved the way it was written, and I was actually reading this book, waiting for class to start on campus, and I was like smiling in reaction to things that were happening in this book, and some people probably thought I was kind of creepy because here I am like sitting by myself reading this book and like smiling and like trying not to giggle. Yeah. So when a book instills an actual physical reaction from me, it means it's getting good. And that was right around the part when things started to get crazy. And people die in this book. Like Veronica Roth had no issue with killing people off, which I think is great because you never know who's going to make it. Like, you have, obviously, you think, like, the main character is going to make it, hopefully her love interest is going to make it, but basically everybody else is up for grabs. So, yeah. Back to the Chicago thing that I was talking about before. This cover, actually, if you look really carefully along the bottom, it has the actual skyline of Chicago on it. And 2 days after I started this book, I went to Chicago for a weekend. I'd never been to Chicago before, and I just thought it was awesome that I started reading this book right around the time that I was going. And so I would read sections of this book and then go to those places in Chicago. Like Sunday morning, I read a part that takes place on Navy Pier, and she has to climb the Ferris wheel because they're playing an intense game of capture the flag. And then 4 hours later, I went to Navy Pier and saw the Ferris wheel. Then later on in the book, she goes to a place they only call Millennium, which is obviously Millennium Park, which I walked through, and they talk about Cladgate / the Bean and how, like, beat up it looks. Saw that as well, like, totally awesome. And also, I now, like, recognize buildings in the skyline because I saw them when I was there. So, and obviously the marshlands is what's left of Lake Michigan. But, I love that it was, like, this continuity between it all, and I had just seen it for the first time. Fantastic. If you haven't figured it out already, I highly recommend this book, even if you've never really read YA before, because even though there's definitely YA elements, there's some stuff in here that is intense, and it will definitely shock you, and it's not a hard read. Like, if I read 200 pages in one day of a book, not only does it mean that it's really good, but it means that it's not really difficult to read. My eyes would be practically skipping over the words because I was, like, so excited to get to the end of the chapter and see what was going to happen. And when that happens, it means, yeah, the book's really good. So, 5 stars for Divergent. As I said before, highly recommended. If you guys have read this book, which I know many of you have, and you want to share your enthusiasm or perhaps your hatred, you can definitely leave a comment below. You can also follow myself and Les on Twitter. You can obviously subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can friend us on Goodreads. All those links are below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.